I know I'm not the only one who dreams of Rome. It was just the best.
There was once a dream that was Rome. You could only whisper it. Anything more than a whisper, and it would vanish. It was so fragile.
Unfortunately, a bunch of disgusting Germanic barbarians ruined everything in the 5th century, destroying humanity's golden path. This bears the question, why didn't Rome, the mightiest power in the world, ever conquer Germania? So, greetings you over 65,000 Romans, and the 80% of wretched barbarians who haven't subscribed yet, as we delve into the Roman forays into the barbarous lands of Germania. Let me be clear, there was never a question about the value Germania brought to the empire. The complete subjugation seemed a real possibility to the Romans. Just remember, they conquered Britannia. First off, these wars were defensive in nature because the Germans started the bloodshed back in the 2nd century BC during the Cimbrian War, massacring the Romans at the battles of Norea and Arausio, which led to the Marian Reforms, paving the path to Caesar's rise in power. You brought this on yourself. Then they reared their ugly heads under Malo of the Sugambri in 17 BC, allying with the Usepites and the Tenctere, storming across the Rhinus into Gallia Belgica. They defeated Marcus Lollius and the 5th Legion, seizing their sacred standard, exposing the vulnerability of Rome's northern frontier, sparking fears that the Germanic tribes might push deeper. Augustus acted swiftly, dispatching reinforcements, quickly fortifying the Rhinus. In 12 BC, Augustus entrusted Nero Claudius Drusus, his stepson and brother of Tiberius, to secure the German frontier. One of the greatest men of his days, Drusus showcased his military acumen, fortifying the empire, before crossing into Germania, ravaging the savages for 2 years, building up fortifications and securing allies. However, the gods did not smile upon Drusus, as he tragically fell from his horse in 10 BC while returning from this campaign, dying. Augustus mourned deeply, granting him the posthumous title Germanicus for his heroics. Drusus' death at 29 cut short a career that surely would have brought Germania under Roman control, but his son quickly proved ready to match his father. His eldest boy inherited his father's agnomen, becoming Germanicus Claudius Drusus. Raised under Augustus' watchful eye, he embodied the ideal Roman. Fluent in Latin and Greek, he excelled in drama, history, philosophy, and poetry, earning praise from Ovid for his fiery eloquence. Suetonius put it best. It is the general opinion that Germanicus possessed all the highest qualities of body and mind, to a degree never equaled by anyone. A handsome person, an unequaled valor, surpassing ability in the oratory and learning of Greece and Rome, unexampled kindliness, and a remarkable desire and capacity for winning men's regards and inspiring their affection. He was the man destined to raise Rome's banners across Germania, and Augustus recognized it, making Tiberius, his heir, adopt Germanicus so he would one day rule. In the meantime, Tiberius ravaged the Germans, preparing for a massive conquest before the Illyrians revolted in 6 AD, preventing the death blow. So, Tiberius marched south, leaving Verus to maintain their position. Sidetracked for 3 years, the Romans, led by Tiberius and Germanicus, pacified the province. Just as things were looking up, they received the horrible news of the Teutoburg Forest disaster. Varus, 3 legions, and 6 cohorts were ambushed by the Cheruscian chief, Arminius, causing Augustus to infamously cry out, "Quintilius Verus, give me back my legions!" This completely changed Augustus' stance on the swampy backwater, becoming far less eager to expand north, only truly enabling Tiberius to restore order along the Rhinus. When Augustus died in 14 AD, Tiberius gave Germanicus the green light to give the brutes what they have coming. For the next 2 years, the Germans were thoroughly routed by Rome, getting crushed at the battles of Pontus Longae, Iristaviso, and the Angevarian Wall, as Tushnelda, the wife of Arminius, was captured. With victory in sight, Tiberius, fearful of Germanicus' growing popularity, recalled him to Rome at the end of 16 AD, refusing his pleas to finally complete the victory, conveniently placing his biological son, Drusus the Younger, to head the Germanic front. Given a nominal promotion, leading the eastern half of the empire, Tiberius undercut Germanicus at every step while he navigated the politics of the Orient. Then, Germanicus suddenly died, alongside any real hope of conquering Germania, on October 10, 19 AD, at just 34, likely poisoned on Tiberius' orders. While Tiberius hardly mourned, foreign nations had great lamentations. Rome's finest general, the one who would have transcended his era to take his place amongst the greatest men of history, was dead. There were those who considered his personal appearance, his early age, and the circumstances of his death, to which they added the proximity of the region where he perished, compared his disease with that of Alexander the Great. Each eminently handsome, of famous lineage, and in years not much exceeding 30, had fallen among alien races by the treason of their countrymen. But the Roman had borne himself as one gentle to his friends, moderate in his pleasures, content with a single wife and the children of lawful wedlock. Nor was he less a man of the sword, though he lacked the others' temerity, and when his numerous victories had beaten down the Germanies, was prohibited from making fast their bondage. But, had he been the sole arbiter of affairs, of kingly authority and title, he would have overtaken the Greek in military fame with an ease proportioned to his superiority in clemency, self-command, and all other good qualities. Now, let's explore an alternate path, one where history was forever changed in 4 AD. For Augustus had hesitated whether to place Germanicus, his sister's grandson, and the theme of all men's praise, at the head of the Roman realm, but, overborne by the entreaties of his wife, had introduced Germanicus into the family of Tiberius, and Tiberius into his own, a benefit which the old empress kept recalling and reclaiming. Here, Augustus ignored the pleas of his wife, adopting Germanicus as his heir instead of Tiberius, a decision that delighted the Roman crowd almost as much as it exasperated Livia. The people buzzed with relief. Their future was secured with the very image of Drusus, not the dastardly shadow of Tiberius. Tiberius was aware that he was never Augustus's first choice, despite his excellent military acumen, and accepted the decision respectably. Having once withdrawn to Rhodes to escape political strife, he chose not to challenge Germanicus' rise, showing deference to the young heir. Yet, Augustus, valuing Tiberius' capabilities, refused to let him fade back into the shadows, assigning him to oversee the eastern administration. The princeps moved swiftly to prepare Germanicus, granting him prestigious positions that bolstered his authority and public image. Germanicus was named chief augur, tasked with reading divine omens through the flight of birds, a sacred duty that tied him to Rome's ancient traditions and earned him the esteem of the elite. He joined the Fratres Arvales, a priestly brotherhood devoted to the fertility of fields, building ties with powerful figures across the empire. Most crucially, Augustus made him the tribune of the plebs, a role that gave him immense power as the people's champion. As tribune, Germanicus could summon assemblies, call the Senate, propose binding laws, and veto the actions of magistrates, or even the Senate itself. His position was sacred, untouchable by law, with any harm against him punishable by death. He could arrest officials who defied the plebeians' interests, order executions for violations, and hear appeals from citizens against any magistrate's rulings, ensuring justice for the common man. Germanicus did his part too, delivering fiery speeches and defending many plebs in trials, solidifying his hallowed reputation. To bind him closer to the Julian line, Germanicus wed Agrippina the Elder, Augustus' granddaughter, just as he did historically. Agrippina, 2 years younger, was raised under Augustus' strict moral code, praised by Tacitus as a wife of notable fruitfulness and shining chastity. Their marriage, strong, loving, and faithful, was rare in an era of political matches where both spouses had constant affairs, so very quickly became the symbol of the virtuous Roman ideal that Augustus championed. Within a year, the gods had blessed them for their piety, as Ceres bestowed them a son, Nero. And no, not that Nero. Even the gods, it was said, envied them, and in the cradle of their firstborn, the empire saw its hope renewed. With his position secured in Rome, Germanicus assumed greater responsibilities as Augustus appointed him governor of the Gallic provinces. Gallia Aquitania, Gallia Belgica, and Gallia Lugdunensis, along with the remnants of Germania his father had won. This placed him in control of 8 legions, a third of Rome's total military. Germanicus continued Augustus's Romanization strategy, the tried and true carrot and stick approach. And, if anyone's wondering, the legions were quite eager to be the stick. He encouraged Gallic aristocracies to develop self-sustaining urban communities, driving economic and political growth, binding them closer to Rome. Regional capitals of the Gallic tribes received imperial patronage, including funds for infrastructure, grants of citizenship to key leaders whose sons were educated in the Roman fashion, and the prestige of bearing names honoring Augustus. Among those were the Aedui at Augusta Donum Aedorum, the Raricae at Augusta Rarica, the Treveri at Augusta Treverorum, the Silvacantes at Augusta Magus, the Arveni at the Augusta Mentum, the Tricassi at Augusta Bono, and the Lemovices at Augusta Ritum. With the Gallic elite competing for attention and prestige from the imperial family via civic rivalry, Romanization was highly successful. Temples, forums, and aqueducts were built to demonstrate their loyalty and sophistication. Keep in mind, by this time, 2 generations had passed since Caesar's conquest. The old tribal animosities had faded, replaced by growing acceptance of Rome. Local governments were already mirroring Rome's structures, albeit on a smaller scale, adopting Roman titles like quaestors, aediles, ordos, praetors, etc. Gaul's economic importance grew under this framework. Its fertile lands produced abundant grain, wine, and timber, while trade routes linked it to the rest of the empire. The relatively long period of peace enabled Gallic communities to thrive. But another key component was the Concilium Galliarum, which promoted political welfare. Created by Drusus the Elder during his spell as governor back from 14 to 12 BC, this policy assembled Gallic elites from cities to express grievances to members and the presiding praetor, and to advise on provincial measures. The assembly also oversaw the imperial cult of Roma at the spectacular sanctuary at Condate near Lugdunum, where its chief priests conducted ceremonies and gladiatorial games. Germanicus' governance proved his administrative acumen in Gaul, yet his true test came with his campaigns into the wild forests of Germania. This was his first major military command, and the young lad had no prior training beyond a few Roman texts on warfare. He immediately followed his father's blueprint, beginning with the Romanization of their allied tribes, building administrative settlements and fortresses to bind them to Rome. His campaigns were tactical and methodical, combining ruthlessness with diplomacy, playing tribes against one another. Eager to stand out, he was the first Roman general to winter inside Magna Germania, sending a clear message to the haughty barbarians. Rome was here to stay. While impressive, friendly tribes provided some supplies, with secure lines from Gaul remaining open, ensuring they were unassailable. However, in the time he was there, he quickly realized the obvious. You can't set up effective vassal states if there's no states to begin with. It's more logical to just conquer it outright. Let's hear how Velleius Paterculus, a soldier who served on this campaign, described it. Yea heavens, how large a volume could be filled with the tale of our achievements in the following summer under the generalship of Germanicus Caesar. All Germany was traversed by our armies. Races were conquered hitherto, almost unknown, even by name. And the tribe of the Cauci were again subjugated. All the flower of their youth, infinite in number though they were, huge of stature and protected by the ground they held, surrendered their arms, and flanked by a gleaming line of our soldiers, fell with their generals upon their knees before the tribunal of the commander. The power of the Longobardi was broken, a race surpassing even the Germans in savagery. And finally, and this is something which had never before been entertained even as a hope, much less actually attempted, a Roman army with its standards was led 400 miles beyond the Rhenus, as far as the river Albis, which flows past the territories of the Semnones and the Hermunduri. And with this wonderful combination of careful planning and good fortune on the part of the general, and a close watch upon the seasons, the fleet, which had skirted the windings of the sea coast, sailed up the Albis from a sea hitherto unheard and unknown. And, after proving victorious over many tribes, effected a junction of Caesar and the army, bringing with it a great abundance of supplies of all kinds. Just as Germanicus was planning his final conquest, assembling 12 mighty legions to finish the job, a massive uprising in Illyricum broke out, drawing Rome's attention southward. In just 2 years, since his adoption as heir, Germanicus transformed from a naive magistrate with poetic talent into a battle-tested commander with honors who was now tasked with pacifying the rebellious province. Let's first clear up a major misconception about Illyria. Like so much of Europe before subjugation by Rome, Illyricum was a patchwork of independent, native, and immigrant communities living side by side. There were no Illyrians or Pannonians before the Romans coined the names for them. There was no coherent group of people, no sense of common identity among them, that could be described as either the Illyrian or Pannonian nation. On a side note, I highly recommend you read Powell's book on Germanicus. It's awesome. Little tidbits like this are why reading books is so important. You just don't find stuff like that in Wikipedia articles. You will learn way more like this, so just read books. Anyways, let's get back on track. Rome's harsh policies of heavy taxation, forced labor, and recruitment into auxiliary units had fueled constant rebellions, culminating in this, the Great Illyrian Revolt. Led by Bato the Decetiate and Bato the Brucian, these disparate groups ravaged Macedonia and threatened Italy itself. Panic gripped Rome. Many feared the invaders could reach the capital in a matter of weeks. Augustus knew this was a time for Germanicus, entrusting him to crush the insurgents, while Tiberius took command in Germania. Germanicus, just as he historically did, waged a swift, decisive campaign. Mobilizing 15 legions, his multi-pronged assaults divided the rebels. In Pannonia, he devastated the Bruci strongholds, forcing Bato the Brucian to surrender in 7 AD. Turning to Dalmatia, Germanicus besieged the mountain fortresses of Bato the Decetiate, employing scorched earth tactics, destroying them the following year. When Germanicus met with the defeated chieftain, he asked him why he and his people had rebelled, to which Bato replied, "You Romans are to blame for this, for you send as guardians of your flocks not dogs or shepherds, but wolves." Ultimately, Germanicus' ruthless efficiency broke the tribe's will and ended the uprising quickly, earning him heavy praise across the Imperium. Upon his return to the Eternal City, he was rewarded with a triumph, parading captives and spoils through cheering crowds. His popularity soared. The people hailed him as Rome's savior. In the aftermath, Rome learned valuable lessons, rethinking the administrative framework for Illyricum, subdividing it into 2 smaller provinces, Dalmatia along the coast and landlocked Pannonia. A comprehensive road-building program began under the legatus Publius Cornelius Dolabella, connecting the province to their neighbors, while towns populated by veterans were established. Bruci recruits were accepted into the Roman army, which had now recognized their technical skill and bravery on the battlefield, creating 8 new cohorts of auxilia. The Romans had clearly learned that their earlier policy of rounding up and deporting young men did not work, as no further rebellions were recorded. Meanwhile, back in Germania, unlike the ill-fated Varus, Tiberius, a far superior commander, trusted the intelligence from Segestus, the pro-Roman Cheruscian chieftain, averting the disaster at Teutoburg. So the Roman elite still viewed the conquest as inevitable. He avoided small skirmishes, opting instead to whittle down Germanic resistance through open battles, playing to Rome's advantage, while striking calculated alliances to play the barbarians off one another. His methodical approach maintained Rome's footholds across the region. Finally, Germanicus arrived in 9 AD, driven to finish his followers' mission. The Germanic peoples, greatly weakened by Tiberius' campaigns and internal divisions, were unprepared for the return of their more aggressive foe. Germanicus, using his tried-and-true tactics honed from his time in Illyria, rashly struck out against the Senoni, an inconsequential tribe who were refusing to pay Rome full tribute. The Senoni were utterly obliterated as the Romans laid waste to their villages and fields in a ruthless campaign. Their attempts to negotiate with Rome were rejected by Germanicus, who decided to make an example out of them, slaughtering men, women, and children. Seizing the moment, Arminius, who had warned about Rome for years, rallied the Cherusci, Angrevari, Thuringi, Angli, and the Hemundori to finally rise up. But many chieftains, having tasted the sweet poison of Romanization, refused their countrymen's call. King Marbodus of the Marcomanni, a fierce rival of Arminius, refused to join the Cheruscian chief, remaining neutral in the conflict, preventing what could have been a potentially devastating blow to the Roman ambitions, despite having previously clashed with the Romans himself. Nonetheless, Arminius faced off against Germanicus at the Battle of Versurgius, but the barbarous horde was no match as Rome's legions crushed them decisively. Arminius, later given the epithet Germanorum Ultimus, the last German, was captured in the clash, effectively consolidating Roman control between the Rhinus and the Albis. With these gains secured, Augustus, wary of overexpansion, decided they had conquered enough for the time being, so ordered Germanicus back to Rome in 10 AD. Upon his return, he was once more greeted with a triumph for his achievements, parading the captured German warriors through the streets, culminated in a ceremonial slaughter of Arminius. The princeps hoped this would be enough to satiate his heir, but he was mistaken. Augustus still wanted to tutor Rome's future, worried that he would ignore his administrative duties for his militaristic ones if he did not make a deep impression upon him. So, for the next 4 years, Germanicus stayed in the capital to learn from the princeps, enjoying the time spent with his lovely wife Agrippina, blessed by the gods with more children. Finally, in 14 AD, Augustus passed on from mortal realm, giving the empire to the 29-year-old Germanicus Julius Caesar. Immediately after, Augustus was deified, taking his rightful place amongst the gods. Germanicus, deeply devout, took on the role of Flamen Divorum Augustalis, the priest of the divine Augustus, overseeing rituals that honored his predecessor, building up his cult across the empire. The new princeps also restored neglected temples across the imperial city, such as the Temple of Hope, built by Attilius back during the Punic Wars, emphasizing his and the empire's renewed piety. Unlike his predecessor, Germanicus did not have the same reservations on expansion, still destined to compete the campaigns of Drusus. Thus, he assembled 12 legions and numerous auxiliary units for the final war, with the troops promised lands across the new province after its subjugation. Precipitating the conflict, Rome sent Catalda, a young Marcomanni nobleman, back to the Marcomanni kingdom, where he overthrew Marbodus and was quickly recognized as a Roman client. In 15 AD, just as the campaign season began, Germanicus and Tiberius poured across the Albis in a two-pronged attack, crushing the hapless barbarians. Following in the footsteps of his legendary grandfather, Julius Caesar, the campaign was extremely brutal on the natives until their spirit was broken under the might of Rome. Tacitus put it best. Their descent was so completely a surprise to the Germans that all who suffered from the disabilities of age or sex were immediately taken or slaughtered. Without a strong leader to rally them together, the last of the Germans, a rigorous coalition of the Rugi, Gepidae, Burgundiae, and the Gothones, were obliterated at the Battle of the Nautisis. Thereafter, a massive monument was erected to mark the spot of Rome's triumph, reading, "The army of Germanicus Caesar, after thoroughly conquering the nations between the Albis and the Vistula, dedicated this monument to Mars, Jove, and Augustus." Thus, by the end of 17 AD, Germanicus had completed his family's destiny, securing Germania Magna for Rome, stretching from the Rhinus to the Vistula, as a third of the Germans were killed and another third were enslaved, flooding markets and funding further expansion. Now, for a third time, Germanicus was honored with a triumph, parading captives from countless tribes in front of jubilant crowds, before he apotheosized his biological father, Drusus, doubling up on his divine heritage. In the years following the conquest, Germanicus turned to the task of integrating Germania and her barbarians into the empire, employing methods honed from the Gallic Wars. However, unlike Gaul, Germania lacked established towns, so Germanicus built costly administrative centers to anchor Roman control. hostile tribes were immediately scattered, making way for these new cities, populated by veterans from across the empire. No doubt a few of them wondered if this was the retirement they'd signed up for, creating the Mediterranean sun for the German reign, but nonetheless, it was a town. In time, these were built up with forums, baths, and amphitheaters, quickly becoming hubs of Roman culture. This subjugation played out just as the historical one of Britannia did. For, to accustom the rest and repose through the charms of luxury, a population scattered and barbarous and therefore inclined to war, Germanicus gave private encouragement and public aid to the building of temples, courts of justice, and dwelling houses, praising the energetic and reproving the indolent. Thus, an honorable rivalry took the place of compulsion. He likewise provided a liberal education for the sons of the chiefs, and showed such a preference for the natural powers of the Germans, that they who had lately disdained the tongue of Rome now coveted its eloquence. Hence too a liking sprang up of our style of dress, and the toga became fashionable. Step by step, they were led to things which disposed to vice, the lounge, the bath, the elegant banquet. All this, in their ignorance, they called civilization, when it was but part of their servitude. Externally, the natural borders of the Aedora and the Vistula provided defensible frontiers once legionary bases were established, having the former border along the entire length of the Rhinus and Danuvius rivers. Plus, the new lands provided many conscripts, eager to fight in the legions turned citizenship. Internally, local councils under allied chieftains were established to pave the path for Romanization, similar to Gaul. Although not the most lucrative province by any means, Germania was not fruitless. The vast influx of slaves bolstered Rome's labor force, building up the imperial infrastructure. The province secured and greatly shortened the lucrative amber trade routes from the Baltic down the Odera to the Danuvius. Although seemingly insignificant, amber was highly prized across the Mediterranean, used in luxury goods and religious practices. Logistically, the plethora of rivers enabled rapid transport of goods and troops. Yet, Germania's clay-heavy soil hindered crop production, relying instead on animal farming. And maintenance proved costly, as small rebellions persisted, though they slowly whittled down with time. With Germania secured, Germanicus deemed the conquest of Britannia unnecessary, as the rugged island would only strain Rome's resources, much as Germania did. With peace secured, Germanicus shifted his attention to running the vast Roman realm. As a fervent student of history, he took inspiration from the great men of his era, with Julius and Augustus Caesar, as well as legendary generals like Scipio Africanus, who he particularly modeled himself after. It quickly became apparent that the East, unsurprisingly, was ripe with corruption and lacks military discipline. That's the Orient for you. Which Germanicus restored with a savvy hand. His eldest son, Nero, just 13, was still too young to take an active role in politics, so he turned to his friend, Drusus the Younger, son of Tiberius, to settle the rising tensions in the Orient. The Armenians had ousted their king, Vonones, the rival challenger to the Parthian throne, and embraced Zenon, the brother of Rome's client king, Polemon of Pontus, threatening war with Ctesiphon. However, Drusus made his way to Armenia, unopposed by Parthia, who was fine weakening their challenger. There, the Roman personally crowned Zenon as Artaxerxes III, a diplomatic coup of the highest degree, as no blood was spilled. This act solidified Armenia as a loyal vassal kingdom, winning Drusus a claim across the Imperium. For the Imperator, the lesson had been learned, recognizing the need to truly win Eastern clients' loyalties, as vassals could easily flip to Parthia. Thus, as historian Lindsay Powell put it, the burden of tribute paid to Rome was lightened to inspire hope of a gentler rule under Rome. Everyone likes lower taxes, if only the Senate could have figured this out a few centuries earlier. In the same vein, Germanicus empowered Cappadocia, Commagene, and Cilicia to patrol their own lands rather than installing Roman garrisons, winning goodwill. Plus, if they ever got out of hand, troops from Syria could easily be moved in to quell them. Germanicus's important economic policy from the Real Palmyra Tariff that he wrote took effect across the empire, as he began centralizing various currencies to Rome's denarius to standardize trade, 100 or so years before Trajan did it historically. To give you a frame of reference, every single Greek city-state, vassal kingdom, and even some provinces like Egypt had their own currencies, with well over 100 in circulation across the empire, predictably leading to rampant corruption. His new policy thus increased trade, military logistics, centralized taxation, and cut down on corruption as the manipulations during currency exchanges were closed. A great series of civil works were constructed under Germanicus: temples, shrines, city halls, colonnades, aqueducts, fountains, bathhouses, and residential districts across the empire, to further Romanize the people, especially in Germania. All these actions made the young Caesar extremely popular. Despite the busy job, he remained devoted to Agrippina and their children, raising them with good Roman virtues. Germanicus brought them with him on his various travels across the empire. They were especially popular throughout his tour of the Nile, where they marveled at its ancient grandeurs, while endearing his family to devoted people. The scent of the river reeds mixed with the dry heat, while crumbling hieroglyphs whispered tales of gods and kings long vanished. At Thebes, he studied inscriptions detailing the conquest of Ramses the Great, who once ruled, according to the Theban priests, an empire stretching from Libya to Scythia, commanding tributes of silver, gold, arms, horses, ivory, perfumes, and grain. These records impressed upon Germanicus the need to preserve Rome for 1,000 years, believing Ramses' realm collapsed because those peoples just listed still persisted to the present, not having been Egyptianized, enforcing his Romanization efforts. During Germanicus' tour of the eastern provinces, King Artabanus II of Parthia sent envoys proposing a meeting at the Euphrates River, and Germanicus, who had begun investigating a potential invasion, accepted the offer, scouting the Parthians' appurtenance. Upon meeting the self-proclaimed King of Kings, Germanicus was convinced there was no way these effeminate cowards could match the might of Rome. By 25 AD, Germanicus had brought Rome unmatched stability and prosperity, yet his ambitions yearned for more, driven by a fascination with the greatest conqueror in history, Alexander. Remember, the juxtaposition to the Great Hellene was common historically. Here, it was everywhere. Sure, he had vanquished the Germans and brought the light of Roman civilization to the barbarians. That was nothing compared to the Macedonians' escapades. He must conquer Parthia and stake his place in history. Make sure to leave a like to see the sequel. If this does well, it may become a series to include further conquests like Persia, India, or even China. Now, you Romans should watch this video where the Western Roman Empire survived in Britannia instead of collapsing. I know you'll like it. If you appreciate my work, please subscribe and consider supporting me on Patreon to get ad-free viewing, maps, and more. These videos are only possible thanks to my patrons' generous support. Goodbye.